Wow. That's all I could really say from a new UN report that just came out detailing the United States' involvement in Afghanistan. Involvement that our own president was warning us about, campaigning on ending this stupid, idiotic war, even telling us specifically warning signs of past empires who entered that territory of Afghanistan and had empires destroyed because of countless wars, like this clip here of US President Donald Trump, which we're going to play here in just a little bit. But Donald Trump, time and time again, has been warning us, saying even that we spend more in Afghanistan in 1 month than we do on the wall. The United States overall, according to even Donald Trump, spent $7 trillion on Middle Eastern wars. Much of that has, of course, gone to Afghanistan. The number of American lives has been 2,372 U.S. military deaths and over 20,320 servicemen and women wounded from this country for absolutely no reason. Literally, children who were born before this war was even started are fighting in this war right now. And now we're getting new numbers, unprecedented numbers, and a shocking statistic of the number of civilians who were just killed and maimed from this conflict for what looks like absolutely no reason. A journalist says, quote, "In Afghanistan, massive airstrikes, drone operations, and brutal night raids are killing more civilians in these days than any insurgent group does." Emmanuel Froez, an Austro-Afghan independent journalist and founder of Drone Memorial, tweeted Wednesday, citing a new report by the United Nations that validated his claim and said that insurgents were still responsible for deaths in Afghanistan, but the majority of the people killed and wounded were civilians combined, and that came directly from the U.S.-Afghan coalition in that region. Shocking numbers. I mean, this report, Jason, let's just get into the numbers here specifically before we get into the bigger aspects here, but this report detailed how 1,773 civilians were killed and wounded between March 1st of this year and March 31st. We're not even counting the month of April, by the way. They were killed. And significantly, we're looking at the numbers here. We're seeing that 581 civilians that were killed during this time were, of course, from pro-government forces, including NATO, that killed the majority of them through these larger strikes here. Jason, this is absolutely, I mean, it should be shocking, but it's not even shocking understanding how the U.S. wars work throughout the years. And to see this one continue is just, to me, totally asinine.
You know, one of the big reasons people like myself, Luke, actually voted for Trump was that he promised we were getting out of Afghanistan. And we heard him say time and time again, it's time to end these wars in the Middle East. And instead, you know, we're talking about more people killed in drone strikes and aerial attacks. And if you go on here, you find out they started keeping records about 10 years ago. They have over 1,000 civilian casualties from airstrikes alone this year or last year, and that's the highest since that they've started recording it. Now, a lot of people are going to say to me, "Well, Jason, they're keeping our soldiers out of harm's way." Well, should that cost civilian lives elsewhere in an unjust war where we shouldn't be there in the first place? And let's be honest, veterans and military families want out. They've wanted out for quite some time. This is the Military Times. This is their own publication. You know, this isn't an opinion piece on Huffington Post or, you know, Fox Business. It's nothing like that. It's not an editorial. These are people that are embedded in this, and they want out. And instead, Luke, what do? We hide the civilian casualties that have only been upped under this administration. He promised us out. Instead, more and more innocent people are dying, and it's not being discussed at all.
Yeah, and people need to understand, even Trump bombastically talks about ending the wars at the same time he's continuing them, expanding them in many regions, and also rolling back on a lot of the transparency efforts to actually see how many civilians were actually innocently, unjustly taken away from this earth for absolutely no reason, just because a U.S. drone came in there and bombed them. Trump specifically, under his presidency, rolled back specific transparency when it came to civilian drones. Now, Jason, we were talking about the story before doing this, and we were like 2,372 U.S. military deaths. I mean, compared to other U.S. military adventures, that's not a lot. Now, that's mainly because of automation and robotics, which is causing a lot of accidents in the field. And also, anyone who comes close to a U.S. base gets shot. And the part of the coalition that the United States set up there, the U.S. Afghan forces, the Afghan forces are mainly made up of, well, not mainly, but there's been specific stories talking about how a lot of the higher leadership are pedophiles there, abusing boys, and the U.S. military gets punished. There were servicemen and women in this country who whistleblowed, who were angry, who tried to stop pedos who were inside the Afghan new military that the United States set up, that the United States empowered, that the United States gave money and arms to. People were held responsible for allegedly going against the grain and whistleblowing, and were punished in the U.S. military for trying to stop pedophilia in Afghanistan. And let's look at the real understanding here. The United States is in there pretty much for natural resources, opium, and a geopolitical strategic point against the next conflict, which, of course, will be Afghanistan, in my opinion. But we have to understand here, this is absolutely all of Trump's doing. I mean, there was alternative media. There was one specific alternative media when Trump, what was it, a year ago or a year and a half ago, specifically promised, we're going to end Afghanistan. And then Trump again came out and said, we don't know. We may come out sometime soon. We don't know. We're not going to give you an exact detail. There was one alternative media personality that sat there bombastically, and he said, no, I promise you, Trump is going to be out in a year. He's just postponing this. Don't believe what he's saying to the media. And it's been over a year. I think it's over close to 2 years now. And again, Trump is still in Afghanistan. The United States still is in Afghanistan. And again, Donald Trump verbally is not for this. And what we're seeing is just more civilian deaths soaring in that region. And the media, most importantly, just kind of shrugs it off, doesn't even care, which is just absolutely mind-boggling when you look at things to actually be critical of Donald Trump of, and something that the media doesn't even dare to mention, which shows you what the media is really about, Jason.
Yeah, exactly, Luke. And unfortunately, we have a president that talks out both sides of his mouth. You want to believe him when he's saying, we're going to end the war. It's going to happen. We're spending too much on this thing. It's costing lives. We're going to figure out a withdrawal plan. And then you kind of realize that withdrawal plan probably has a lot to do with private military groups or PMGs, the return of Blackwater. All right, now, not that it ever really left, just the name left, XC Services, Garde, whatever you want to call it. It changed many times, but now it's back to Blackwater. And a lot of that has to do with that being in these nations. Now, even though I don't love private military groups, I would love to end U.S. drone strikes and actual soldiers. You talked about almost 3,000 people, Luke, dying in Afghanistan, and you're right. In retrospect to other wars, that's a very, very low number. But as far as human life goes, what did they really die for? Some oil executive? Some power in the Middle East for the United States and its allies? Was it worth it? I'll tell you right now, they didn't die because people had box cutters and they hated our freedoms. That's not the real story, folks. If that was the real story, there would have been military action in Saudi Arabia. There would have been military action in Pakistan. And there would have been military action in Israel. Let's be honest. All three of those nations had real roles in 9/11 that we never, ever discussed in the mainstream, Luke. And maybe you could maybe justify that to me by doing that evidence. Hey, we had these rogue elements in here and these guys helped pull it off. We do need to do something. No, instead, we go to Afghanistan where there was no evidence bin Laden ever was. I mean, all the evidence had him in Pakistan. In fact, even if you believe the details of that raid, where was he? Pakistan. It's never discussed. It's the weirdest thing. And to this day, Pakistan is our ally, a buddy to the man who announced he was running for president, Joe Biden. And Afghanistan, no, we just keep losing life, killing civilians on behalf of the military-industrial complex, and it's really disturbing.
Yeah, even if you dare to believe the different versions of the story of how they actually captured Osama bin Laden, how they just kept changing the narrative, which is absolutely insane, disingenuous. But what have people died for? Every life is precious. We're not just talking about the 2,372 U.S. Military personnel, but a lot of innocent people are being caught up in this. And people need to understand here, when they're getting caught up in this, this is creating more jihadism. This is causing more radicalism. If you're a family member and your family gets killed, and all that, all that information gets covered up, which of course Donald Trump announced he's going to be stopping a lot of these reports from even coming out. If your whole family gets innocent, your whole family gets assassinated, which happens so much, as we're seeing by these numbers in Afghanistan. A lot of the family members are naturally going to try to fight alongside to anywhere to try to get some kind of retribution. And obviously the biggest forces there are radical Islamist groups that people join up in retribution to a lot of these bigger attacks. It's called blowback. It's what continues. And what are people dying for? What are American soldiers dying for? What's the increase in post-traumatic stress disorder, suicide levels in U.S. military troops? Why is that happening? Because of some neocon, bloodthirsty asshat who's in a nice fancy suit and afraid to get his hands dirty, who's never been to that region, but will send you over there and profit off of your blood, sweat, and tears, and off the human suffering and misery. It's a huge industry. The military-industrial complex is ripe with individuals who just are bloodthirsty for the pure sake of just profit, and that needs to be called out. So importantly, because when you look at the media landscape, no one's really doing it. I'm watching all the the TV elite stations, and no one's talking about this report that I have seen so far. I'm watching Fox, I'm watching CNN, and none of them are mentioning it. No one's talking about this, and we're creating more of these radical Islamists to fight. This war will never end, because there will always be radical Islamists when we start creating them by bombing their villages and killing their innocent people. Obviously, there's two major wrongs here. There's no justifying any killing of any human being, and that's why we as humanity needs to stand up and let people know that, hey, this is not okay. This is not what I want my tax dollars going to. This is not something I want to continue or be a part of, because if you do, you literally have blood on your hands. That's my take on it. Anything else you want to say, and do you want to close it off here, Jason?
No, I can only hope that we can find a way out of these wars of aggression in the Middle East. And in order to do that, we have to have people on both the right and left come together and stop arguing and start worrying about the real issues like the one we just covered. Folks, we're doing 4 videos a day across 2 separate stations. Pulse Change, We Are Change. Make sure you are subscribed to both, ringing that bell so you get the notifications, sharing them on social media so we can continue to grow and bring you important news reports like this one. People are not talking about Afghanistan anymore, and obviously it's a real issue when we're killing more civilians than ever. So I really got to encourage all you guys to get out there, actually get involved, show this information to others, and be the change you want to see in the world.